This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast. And this is going to be a lot of fun in this episode. Joining me today, somebody that I've got to know professionally this year, and I have to say it's going to be fun. You're in for a good ride, guys. This is Cheyne. Welcome to you today, Ryan. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm feeling the pressure now about the fun bit.
We do.
See what we can do.
We do. We were introduced in 2022 by the formidable Daniel Cornwell, who I've known for over 20 years, and I think you've known professionally for a long time. So we will definitely be tagging him. He's actually, if you want to go back into the archive on the podcast, Dan was on our show. I think it was back end of 2021 where he was talking about how he made his business stand out in the hospitality downturn during COVID, etc. But we've both known Dan very, very long time. So big shout out to him. So for those who are not yet familiar with you, because you know they'll be clicking on you on LinkedIn, Ryan, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So my name's Cheyne, as you said. I've had this very long and fortunate career in HR, and I know you'll find it hard to believe, but it's over 27 years. I mean, I know.
Can't believe it.
I don't look old enough, do I? But unfortunately, I am. And most notably, most of that career's been in retail in HR. So started off as a youngster as an area people officer in Argos many moons ago. But I guess most notably, I spent 10 years as people director at Pets at Home during a fantastic period of growth and the brand really becoming what it is today, which is like phenomenal. And it's great to look back and see that journey. So I did 10 years there, and then 7 years at a business called rentalcars.com. Guess what we did? We rented cars online, and we still do, or they still do. And as part of that business, we then merged with booking.com. And essentially, if you go on booking.com now, anything that isn't a hotel, so car hire, taxi, attractions, flights, that's basically the team that I used to work with in Manchester. And then most recently, I've been at Motorpoint PLC.
He's not holding up a car, if you're listening. He's holding up a mug with Motorpoint on it. And do you know what? If you're not yet familiar with Motorpoint, it will now become in your subliminal vision. And as you're driving around, you will see a sign for Motorpoint, because that's what's happened since I've been working with you.
I'm expecting a sales boost after this broadcast. So I'm Interim Chief People Officer, covering an amazing lady called Kat Mosley while she's on maternity leave. And we're in the throes of a digital transformation, as isn't everybody. But we've been well established for 25 years selling nearly new cars. And we're just seeing how we can do that better to support our customers online. So it's been a great 9 months so far, and we'll see what happens. But so I've never been a recruiter per se.
Nope.
But clearly, from my Pets at Home time onwards, I have been responsible for recruitment as part of my HR team. And back in the day at Pets at Home, we had no recruitment function, and we set it up from scratch. And Olivia Hughes, it was her, and she's now formed a career in recruitment many years later in her own right. And then at Booking, rentalcars.com and Booking, I actually had two recruitment teams. So it's always been a big part of what I've been responsible for delivering, but I've never actually been a recruiter myself, although some of my best friends are recruiters.
You probably look older than you do if you had been a recruiter for 27 years, because I'm 24 years in, honey, and I have to have I have to have like really poor lighting so you can't actually see the bags. Thank you for that. And actually, I really hope that as you're listening to this, you'll understand the context, because we're going to talk today about what we can do as a recruitment industry to ensure we're making the experience for our end user clients, i.e. Motorpoint, Pets at Home, Booking.com, whoever your customer is, what we can do better. It's all about creating best practice. That's one of the main reasons I do what I do. So I love that you've contextualized it perfectly. It's almost like it was scripted, but it wasn't. So in your experience over the last sort of 15 years, 20 years since you've sort of been responsible for those in-house recruitment functions, what to you does good recruitment practice look like?
So thinking about this, obviously for this afternoon's podcast, And I keep going back. There's a real danger that I'll just keep going around in circles here. But ultimately, for me, it's all about relationships, right? There's a people function.
Yeah.
Now, I know internally it sits within HR, but sometimes, I mean, we've had a bit of this. Actually, it's interesting where the recruitment team talk about HR, and it kind of, what are you talking about? You are, but it's kind of from a different lens. So. We'll talk about relationships a lot, but I think for me, good practice, I guess 3 key things really, which is tied to relationships for me. Firstly is a clear understanding of the job and the business and all that. So you can't recruit successfully, in my mind, unless you understand who your end customer is, which. Right, no shit, right? It's
true. It's true.
And then I do think that's why sometimes internal recruitment teams should have an advantage, because I always think if the business that you're in can't sell that business better than somebody external, there's something wrong.
Totally agree.
So if it is external, if it's an agency or a headhunter relationship, understanding of the business. Great stakeholder management, and I think that internal credibility really comes with keeping people informed, doing things in partnership,
telling the truth to your stakeholder. Going back to your stakeholder and saying, "I haven't got anybody, I haven't got the right person." Yeah, setting expectations.
But you can do that if you've got the right relationship.
It goes back to that
relationship,
right?
Let me just stop here. It's all about relationships.
It's all about relationships. Right? That's the quickest podcast in history. We're finished. We're not. Stay tuned.
And then, and I guess this might be a bit of a cheat because they are a stakeholder, but the whole candidate experience. And again, I think internally, and whether it's internal or external, this is absolutely key. And I always remember going back many years around that whole thing about whoever it is you're dealing with, that person's a potential customer.
Absolutely.
And if they go through a rubbish experience with you, then that maybe they're not right for the job. That's fine, but they've been through a process. They have a touch point, and they're a customer for your business, your brand, whatever it is. And if you get that wrong, then you're shooting yourself in the foot twice.
You really are. I love that.
And I think it's as simple as that. I'm hoping there are simple words of wisdom, not
they are. Well, they are. But think about it. As you're listening to this now, you have been, whether it's been in a restaurant or you've been in a shop or you've been through a candidate experience where you have not been treated with respect or you've not been listened to. You don't go back. You don't shop there again, and you definitely don't recommend your friends, you don't recommend your colleagues. So what Ryan is saying is absolutely right, that the third stakeholder is probably the most important one, which is your candidate. They're your customer. We're all internal, client, candidate, we're all customers.
Yeah. So there'd be my 3, I think. But
I think the 3 can actually be underpinned by one word, which is actually communication. And you said relationship, but what makes a good relationship is communication, and also expectations. I mentioned it a little bit earlier on, being honest, as whether you are an internal recruiter. Actually, this applies to all of you, whether it's internal or external. You have to be honest and open with setting expectations, because that's, if you think about any relationship that works, you're not building hope, you're not raising hope, you're not underperforming on high expectations. It's just being honest.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's really difficult at times at the moment. And obviously in my role, I see it from both angles.
Okay.
Because part of my job is to kind of bring amazing people into the business. Yeah. And part of my job is to make sure we've got fair and equitable compensation and benefits and all that sort of thing. And at the moment, in certain areas, I think the upward pressure on pay and all that sort of stuff, that you have to have these difficult conversations pretty much on every hire. I mean, that's the way it's kind of getting. So, I mean, it's a bit obvious, but in tech's always been a hot market. There's always been short of candidates. It's always been a kind of, well, I say always, probably not always, not in 1732, but more recently. So, you know, it's an inflationary market, and we're finding, you know, we're not a tech superstar, you know, we're not necessarily top of the list of who tech people want to go to work for. We're not a Facebook or a Google or whatever, but we have to tell our story. But every time you then have a conversation, you have a conversation at the beginning about salary expectations and all that sort of stuff. You go through a process that might take a week or two, and by the end of that process, their expectations have gone up because they've had 2 other offers. And it's the same, you know, less obviously perhaps for most of the audience, but you know, in our industry, in the car industry, mechanics and technicians, it's the same. They're in short supply. They're probably at a different part of the kind of pay scale to high-end software engineers, etc. So it's a different part of the market, but still it's very inflationary. So as a recruiter, you often have to have those
difficult conversations.
We've agreed this salary. We've agreed this salary. Actually, it's going to be X more, and you're having those conversations all of the time. All the time. Sometimes it's like, yeah, it's fine, no problem, we'll stretch. And sometimes it's, well, we can't afford a Ferrari, we can only afford a BMW.
Yeah, and the BMW will probably function for most people, but it's that expectation. I think that's really interesting, and I think this will resonate with every single listener, no matter what their market. We are in an inflationary market, and it has been. I don't know whether the bubble will burst. I can't see that happening because most markets are still talent short, and I think there will be until you and I probably retire. So if that can actually ever happen,
it'll be a lot before you retire, maybe.
Well, I don't know. So I think it's really I'm so glad I invited you on for so many reasons, but for this particular insight, I think it's really important for people to hear, because what tends to happen is this disingenuous kind of, you know, recruiters are just trying to get a bigger fee, and we're all commission led, and actually, no, what a good recruiter should be doing is consulting, and is knowledgeable about the market and understands that it is inflationary, but equally, what's the value of this person? What is the benefit of this person coming into your business? You know, why would they want to come and work, for example, a Motorpoint over a Facebook or a Google? Actually, it's because you're going through this digital transformation. It's part of change. It's, you know, when you come out of that the other side in a couple of years, this project will, you know, absolutely, you know, fire your career through the rafters. Whereas if you just go and become another developer in Facebook, you know, rubbing elbows over else. So it's how recruiters can position the opportunities, and I think it's a really important point to make, because they will probably be having this conversation on a daily basis. And actually, I hear a lot of testimony from my agency clients. Obviously, most of what I do is agency, but I do have internal clients like you. But most of the agency people that I'm speaking to, they're really a lot of recruiters are struggling, especially those in their early career, to have the credibility to push back, to, you know, on the phone to Ryan Cheyne at Motorpoint saying, I need to push back here. You're going to need to pay 35. And I know your budget's 32, but if you don't pay the 35, you're not going to get them.
And it's really tricky, right? And I think that's where it comes back to that thing about stakeholder relationships and candidate relationships, because you've got to be realistic to the candidate. But, you know, my biggest problem is not, I mean, obviously we've all got budgets and times are tight and all that sort of stuff, but actually the biggest problem you have is your internal pay structures. So this person might be worth 35, but you've got their boss is on 36, and you start coming up against all those sorts of challenges. But it's about conversation, it's about communication, it's about being honest and transparent and understanding from both perspectives. It
all intertwines, doesn't it? And it's good recruitment done well starts with your very first point, which is about relationships and understanding. If you're an internal recruiter, you need to understand each internal stakeholder and manage that relationship differently if you need to. But if it's agency recruiters listening, then you need to get under the skin, and you can't just take a job spec and not speak to anybody. You can't just send a CV and not speak to anybody. This is about being consultative. So, okay, let's flip it. What the pet hates, what do internal stakeholders like you absolutely detest? Because I want us to, from this, have a checklist of what we should be doing better. What's the pet hates?
So, I mean, obviously there's kind of an element of it, which is the flip of the, but there's a couple of things, and these are probably, if I'm honest, more about agencies and
fair enough.
because obviously my internal recruitment teams are awesome if they're listening, and I have nothing that I hate about them. I think the business development thing is really tricky, right? So unsolicited CVs, and and this is probably me at my age, and I find in email marketing just more and more intrusive and persistent. And now I'm assuming people do it because it's a numbers game and at some point it works. Mm-hmm. But for me personally, I just hit delete straight. I don't even reply, which I feel, for me instinctively, I feel
guilty. Terrible because you're so lovely. That's why.
Well, in my early career, I think I did reply to all these things, and then I realised I either just got sucked into a time-wasting conversation, or, and I mean, there's a company at the moment that emails me every week with like loads of CVs. We've got these people on the market. I just go, don't waste your time. You probably haven't got them anyway. It's probably just a hook, and it just feels very dated, but it still happens. And then I guess there are also these CRM systems that kind of repeat. So you get the first email, right? I'm not biting, I'm not replying, delete, right? A week later, you get, sorry, just wanted to make sure this was at the top of your list. Then you get the kind of, this goes on for weeks.
I know.
Press this button if you're not interested. Listen, I'm not replying. I'm not interested.
Not interested.
Actually, I'm getting a bit.
No, do you know what? I get it as well, and you are absolutely right. I don't reply to any of them. I used to, because you're polite and I'm polite, but you don't want to engage with somebody where it's not genuine. They're not really trying to. Well, for me, it's usually they're selling some kind of software. It's not. Although occasionally do get the odd, I think, bot rec trying to send me recruiters as a recruitment company, and I'm like, do you actually look at what I do? But anyway, that's rec, I think. But I hold that pet hate, and I want to chuck it in room 101, because
that would be a definite.
It's so disappointing to hear that's and this actually leads on to what I'm going to ask you next about, what we can do to elevate our reputation externally as recruiters, as an industry ourselves. But for me, that is lazy recruitment. And I understand about algorithms. I know that if you're doing an e-shot and pressing to 30,000, if even 10 reply and you make 10 grand a pop out of those emails, great. But it's just not.
It doesn't create the love. And
no.
And if recruitment is a relationship business, which we said it is, then it's just really frustrating. And I think part of it. So I know another kind of hate is. I know that there's a lot of the recruitment process and stuff that's driven by numbers and time, and it's like, if I realise this is a cold lead, let me hang up because I need to get onto a hot lead and all that sort of stuff.
Right,
that is definitely a thing, right? This may be from the 80s, where everybody goes to recruitment school and learns the core KPIs and lots of people, and I get that, right? And actually, one of my best team members at rental cars, he was brilliant at this. But the brilliantness about it was you don't make it feel like that.
No.
So I get it, right? And you come to a polite and a mutual end, rather than a kind of like, okay, you're no use to me, Ryan, so ka-ching. Like, I am exaggerating a bit, but you know what I mean.
Totally. No, I agree with you absolutely. And yes, recruitment is a business and a sector based on people hitting targets. So, let's not pretend it's anything. We're not going to sugarcoat it. However, you are absolutely right. You do not need to be disingenuous about how you build those relationships, because what if the following week you turn around and go, actually, we are going to be hiring, and you would have had a great call with that person and they were really pleasant with you. The first person you'd probably call is the person you've got a relationship with. So I just think you can still hit your targets. And by the way, any recruitment company that is managing their recruiters by the volume of calls, you need shooting. Let's measure outcomes, guys. That's much more valuable KPI. I'm all for KPIs, but the right ones, outcomes.
And I do understand it, right? I mean, part of the reason I'm in HR, right, is because I seem to be an ability to see things from both perspectives. And I get it's tough, right? Because if it's based on relationships, building relationships from scratch is tricky.
Of course it is.
You know, I mean, we talked about Daniel, for example. I've known with him and worked with him for years, but the reason that is because I trust him. And you know, pick up the phone and do a good brief, and you'll get the outcome. But he's in a kind of higher end, more in the exec space.
But he and I came from a similar ilk. We both came from, I was from it was called Prime Time. He was from Michael Page. You were trained the KPI way. And then he elevated himself through his career. He's obviously earned his stripes, as have I. And you can then become much more, you know, ninja about it. You know, I'm very, very low ratios. You know, I'll literally get one candidate out for one job and they'll get the job. You know, I don't need to, you know, cast the net too wide really, because I've already done all the graft, but I've been doing it 24 years. So I think I don't want to alienate our audience, who a lot of whom are in their early careers. And what Ryan is saying here is not to alienate, or what I'm saying to alienate you, but actually just take it on board, make the call count, even if the person at the end of the phone is saying, we're not hiring right now. I say, right, well, that's really interesting. What projects have you got coming up? You know, what headache can I help you with in the future? Is there any insights I can give you? They will remember that. And actually, when I worked through the recession of 2009, which was a proper recession, it was horrific. No one knew it was coming. And it hit every single recruitment company certainly in the UK.
I don't know why I'm smiling. I'm just
it was horrific. It was really awful because nobody prepared, and you hadn't lined your coffers, you hadn't been protecting your cash, and you had no furlough. So it really was catastrophic. And we really did have a tsunami of redundant recruiters, which had never happened before. And I would obviously still do business development. And that's how my calls went. What can I do for you right now? Because I know you're not going to be hiring. That was my assumption. And I'm not going to assume you're hiring. What can I do for you? What can I do to support you? What information can I give you? What insights can I give you? Nothing confidential. And you know what? As soon as the market picks up, which it inevitably did, I was their first point of call. And I think there's a lesson here in that what Ryan's saying is absolutely right. You know, we understand that certainly in your early career, we know that you have to go through the mechanics. That's how you become an expert. It is in any sector, in any job, doesn't matter what your job is, but actually you can still do it properly and with integrity.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree.
I'll just answer my own question, Ryan, basically. So if you could have a magic wand, obviously with Motorpoint on it, so it's branded, what would you do to elevate the recruitment industry? How would you brand it up, or what would you do if you were me, basically?
I mean, we've probably touched on it, right? But I think you know, a lot of recruiters will say, "Well, we work in true partnership with you, and we're like an extension of your brand and all that sort of stuff." Well, that's great. Be that, because that's what we're looking for. And I'm not talking about RPO here. No. I mean, that's kind of working it slightly differently, but and we don't all need big RPO contracts and stuff. But essentially, that's what it is. You want to know that your business is being represented brilliantly by whoever it is, and I think that's where, you know, I'm assuming if you're working with people that you enjoy working with and brands that you enjoy working with, then it works so much better.
Of course it does.
Because you've got that genuine partnership.
Yeah. A good recruiter, and whether that is an internal recruiter or an external one with multiple relationships, we're the conduit, for want of a better expression, of ensuring that they're getting the best talent for their business. And the only way you can do that, I mean, we keep, like you say at the very start, jokingly, but actually it's true. It all starts with that key relationship. So I think, and it's probably one of the most overused euphemisms in recruitment, true partnership. What does that actually mean? I want, you know, the whole notion that HR and recruitment in an internal context would tend to work in the same, you know, you are one and the same, and an HR director typically has a recruitment manager looking after things because they're doing, you know, more strategic stuff. But actually, maybe we should all start thinking like that. We should all start thinking like people directors, even even recruiters coming up through the ranks, because actually we are in a human industry. That's what we're doing. We're placing human beings into a
and I think that's so true. And the other thing that you are is you're actually the starting point for culture and the people agenda for the business. So if I go back way back to my Pets at Home days, when I started, I was head of HR. I was, but I was the head. I was reported to the CEO and all that. We were spending an absolute fortune hiring people into shops across the country, we had horrendous attrition at that time. And over the year, I mean, this isn't about. So when I started, our turnover was 80%, right? We got it down to 18.
Wow.
And people said, how do you do that? And there's a lot that goes into doing that. But the first thing we did was sorted out recruitment, because if you get it wrong at the front end, then you spend all your time unpicking problems, managing performance, and replacing churn. Whereas if you get it right at that front end, then you can focus on career development and making sure they have amazing careers within a fantastic business. And now that's a very simplified version, but I truly believe that recruitment is where you get it, you build your culture and you build your people agenda. And we ended up as the Sunday Times best place to work.
That's amazing.
And that was a long time ago now, but they are still an amazing place to work. They still, and for me, get it right first time, get them through the door. And I think I had a conversation, and I won't this, and actually only thought about this because of this podcast. I was having a conversation, and we were doing some relationship stuff with an agency, and they were like, if you've got a cracking candidate, then we react really quickly. We get it filled really quickly. If we've got somebody who's we're not so sure about, then we're a bit slow and we're a bit lack decisiveness. And this was a conversation I was having. And afterwards I thought, well, actually, can you just send me cracking candidates then?
Yeah.
Then we'll be happy.
Absolutely.
Now, that again is an oversimplification. I'm not having a go at them because I know what they made of the discussion that we were having. But you just want to say, I want every candidate to be cracking within the confines of pay and location, blah, blah, blah.
So within the culture, but I agree. Yeah, we just want the unicorns, don't we? You've led very nicely to culture, though. So what's happening in your last few roles in terms of a lot of things that I think recruiters again can be fantastic ambassadors for, in terms of talking about EDI, talking about mental health, talking about inclusivity, ageism. We're trying to as an industry, we're trying to breach all of this and change the narrative and just destigmatize everything, but it make cultures make the norm where it's just normal to have all these initiatives. So what are you doing yourself there, and what are you seeing as a sort of shift?
So I think it's really the EDI agenda and sort of things like mental health and well-being. They're just huge topics, and again, from a recruitment point of view, you guys and the internal external will play a huge part in shaping again, getting it right first time at the intake, because we can't develop careers and promote people of whatever minority group we want to check without them coming through the door in the first place. So I think there's a huge responsibility. I do think it's really tough, and the thing I think is difficult, I was at Monday, so a couple of days ago, I was at the Inspirational Automotive Women Awards, and we had a couple of winners, which is great. And the automotive industry, probably not surprising, is highly male dominated. And again, the pipelines, it's a bit like software engineering. The pipelines don't exist in education and all that sort of stuff. But nobody is just I have to use the word carefully these days. Nobody's just one binary in terms of who they are, right? So nobody is just male or just female or just white or of an ethnic minority. And I think we've got to start to focus so much more on that intersectionality, because yes, you may be female, but you may also be of ethnic minority, or you may have neurodiversity, and you're pretty much guaranteed to be a combination of all these things.
Of course you are.
And I think we've spent a lot of time in the HR world trying to almost compartmentalize it. And I've definitely done this in the past, where you kind of go, right, our focus is going to be gender.
Yeah.
Your focus can't be gender without touching on all the other things that,
totally agree,
that make up people. So I think, you know, whatever we can do, I mean, we're just introducing a new applicant tracking system. It has the ability to anonymize CVs and all that. And I think there are some practical things that we can do. But I guess the biggest thing is reaching out to the widest possible audience and making sure that barriers, whatever those barriers are, as low as possible to enable people to enter the game and be fairly considered.
Yeah, it's really good.
And just quickly on the kind of well-being and wellness thing, the other thing is it is moving so quick, right? So, you know, well-being, like roll back 12 months, was kind of about keeping fit and mind, you know, here's a free app, loads of people got free apps, and that's all well and good, and we do that, and I'm not claiming here that we've got this cracked by any stretch of the imagination. We haven't. Right, but roll forward. I mean, we've done 2 engagement surveys this year, one in February and one in September, right? Whenever you do an engagement survey, the pay and benefits thing is always the lowest score.
Wow.
It always is. I've never done an engagement survey where it isn't, because you're saying to people, what would you like? Well, I'll have more money, please. Right. But between January and September, in January, we had nobody mentioning cost of living crisis. In September, our feedback is full of it.
Of course it is.
And the world has moved and is moving so rapidly. You've got to be on it.
You do.
And I think for me, things like the app and those sort of things, that I wouldn't take them away, but actually what's at the heart of it is creating a place where people can talk.
Absolutely.
People comfortable saying what's going on in their lives from their window. And well-being is more about that manager relationship than anything else. If you've got a decent relationship with your manager, then that's the core for a driving agenda, and the well-being agenda. And
I
culture.
agree. Making people feel safe, making people feel safe that they can talk, and that starts, it cascades down, to be honest with you. So the senior leadership team, you know, and it's sharing that vulnerability and keep creating safe spaces. So I think that's a beautiful place to finish this podcast, because you always make me feel safe when I talk to you. And I said it'd be fun, and it was. So I'm glad we carried on beyond the first point. Otherwise, it would have been, you know, what people get to listen to. They might stick something else on. Although we're both massive podcast junkies, aren't we? So we'll talk about those another time. Thank you so much for joining us, Ryan, on the Recruiters.
Thanks for having me. I have enjoyed it. Yeah, I've had fun, even if nobody else has.
I'm sure lots of people will. And thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.